Hi, everyone. So excited to announce and introduce Henry Gordon-Smith of Agritecture. He's going to lead the workshop, How to Design a Greenhouse or Vertical Farm. Henry, take it away.
Thanks so much, Noah. Hi, everyone. My name is Henry Gordon-Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of Agritecture, a global urban agriculture consulting firm, a blog all about urban agriculture, and also we have some software that helps plan urban farms. So I'm really excited to be speaking to you today and joining in this amazing summit. And really what we're trying to do today is talk about the future of greenhouses and vertical farms. These are emerging forms of producing fruits and vegetables close to the city. And so they play a role when we're thinking about the kind of vegan future or the vegetarian future that we all are motivated by. So my job today is to kind of frame your thinking a little bit before I get into some of the specifics of how you can actually plan these businesses. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a story, a little bit of my background, talk about urban agriculture, help frame your thinking a little bit about that, and then kind of demonstrate a tool that Agritecture has developed that can help you plan urban farms, specifically greenhouses and vertical farms. So I hope you're ready. Let's dive in here. Let me just go to my next slide. Okay. Did they go to the next slide there? Is that all clear? I think so. Okay, great. So this is a picture of me back in 2011, around 2010, 2011, I started getting curious about the future of agriculture. You know, how are we really going to produce more food locally? And particularly, I was interested in the urban context, growing food within the city boundaries. You know, when you look around the city and you see available rooftops, available basements, available vacant lots, you start to see opportunity to grow food in those spaces. And I really wanted to understand, how is that actually going to work? What are the economics of these different farming types and how will that work? So this is me actually in Vancouver, Canada, where I was studying, and I was just exploring this topic of urban agriculture. And I'm visiting a vertical farming company called Local Garden, which is actually the first vertical farm in North America. And what they had done was pretty cool. They had converted the kind of rooftop of a parking garage into an 8,000 square foot vertical farm. It was sort of in a greenhouse. So imagine kind of quite a tall sort of block square structure. It wasn't greenhouse in the typical rounded format, but it was this ETFE thin material, and it was stacked indoors like you see here. It had kind of these multiple levels, and they moved on this rotating system. Now, since then, I've learned a lot about trying to reduce failing points, and this farm ended up actually not being successful after a couple of years. But it was really the example of how people were trying to integrate these into cities and how I analyzed it that made a good foundation for what we do today. So, you know, this farm didn't really respond to what the consumers needed. It was growing leafy greens, and it was growing it in one of the most expensive ways of doing that, vertical farming. And so it wasn't really responding to a lot of the needs in Vancouver itself. It had a lot of moving parts that were intended to kind of equalize sunlight, but there's not that much sunlight in Vancouver already. And overall, it was a lesson that context matters, okay? So when you're thinking about the future of urban agriculture, the drivers that are localized, the labor costs, the energy rate, the demand from high-end restaurants or high-end consumers or regular consumers, all of those factors really matter when you're planning something that's producing a food product to be consumed. And so I wanted to study this and dive deeper and kind of break it into sort of typologies. How do we compare these different options? How do we help reduce risk by helping others plan and estimate the costs of these? So I kind of initiated this journey back in 2011 to gather knowledge around the world about urban agriculture, all different kinds, to share ideas on our blog, Agritecture. You know, now it's a blog that we have multiple people running it, but it's a blog that I started in my dorm room. It was really a big passion project for me. And it was really about exposing these kind of grand challenges globally of rapid urbanization and the need to really develop our cities more sustainably. And it was my belief that there were real opportunities to develop cities that were more resilient to climate change by growing food locally, but also develop sort of this entrepreneurship around that there was actually ways to generate profit off of that, which would be even a way to make it more sustainable in the long term. I also looked a lot into history, and I looked at, you know, what were some past examples of urban agriculture from around the world, from Southeast Asia to Cuba. And even if we looked in New York, where I was living after a few years, when I really wanted to pursue this idea even further around 2013, you know, New York City used to be, Manhattan used to be an island that had agriculture on it. So when we were in the past, we didn't really develop the cities and the places we lived in without also developing the food we need to survive. And this really fascinated me, that a lot of my work is about kind of reframing how we think about the city, and that when we develop cities and places that consume energy, consume food, consume water, we also can start to reframe and develop those in the future where they actually produce some of that water, some of that food, and become more resilient. And it's not just about the actual yield necessarily, but it's also about how we reframe cities as producers instead of consumers. And that's just an idea that really excited me. But how do you do this? Well, this is one visual that sort of helps frame your thinking about the various options. Imagine urban agriculture as tools in the toolbox, or colors, and the city and the vacant spaces are the kind of canvas for you to paint and to make things more productive. But there's really multiple ways to do this. So, one of those ways is one you might be more familiar with, which is kind of community gardens. So Battery Park in New York City has a kind of garden which is within that park. It's very open to the public. It's very accessible. It's wonderful because it produces biodiversity. It helps manage stormwater when it comes. And it's very open, so it has this social impact that's quite visible in public. But when the winter comes, it's not really productive, and it also doesn't have a very commercial justification to it. Now, Brooklyn Grange is a really exciting example of urban agriculture. It's a rooftop farm and uses an engineered soil. And this soil is a little bit more sophisticated, so it's lighter and can be embedded into the rooftop where Brooklyn Grange is. But this is a commercial farm now. Now this farm is, some of their locations are over 40,000 square feet, and they run them as commercial farms, and they actually run events on there too to generate additional revenue. But again, if there's a big storm or if winter comes, Brooklyn Grange cannot be productive in the same way as some of the kind of more controlled systems that I'm going to talk about in a moment. So Harlem Grown is interesting. It's a great project I volunteered on when I first moved to New York, and it's a combination of kind of an outdoor simple hydroponic greenhouse and then multiple lots of soil-based production. So now it's like, okay, well, you can combine them. You can have a little bit of soil, which gives you the benefit of the biodiversity and the variety and the greening of the city. But I can also have a greenhouse that gives me a little bit of control in case there's bad weather or it's cold outside. My plants can continue to grow. So that's what I call kind of a hybrid model. Sky Vegetables, these are all in New York, but you can find these examples in pretty much every major city around the world now. But Sky Vegetables is a 10,000 square foot hydroponic greenhouse in the Bronx, and it's on an affordable housing building. So it's integrated into the building. It actually maintains rainwater that comes. It insulates the building in the winter time. It produces jobs for those that work in the building, and even some of the produce goes towards the building. Now, this is more expensive than building on the ground, but again, you get year-round production, which is quite exciting. And then Aero Farms is a really an example of a very popular new method of urban agriculture, probably over the past 7 years, getting popular, or even a little bit longer than that. You saw me visiting one of the first vertical farm in North America, local garden. But Aero Farms is really this representation of what happens when we control all the variables needed for growth. Can we grow more per square foot? Can we grow more no matter what the weather is? And can we do it with much less water and almost no or zero pesticide use? And so these are kind of like leafy green factories that produce food on the outskirts of the cities. They're very expensive. They have a lot of embodied energy and equipment, but they can achieve really maximum consistency and resilience. So that's a lot of examples, okay? But the point here is that when you're looking at a city, let's say an available rooftop or basement, you can start to already match what might make sense in that location based upon this spectrum. You can also match goals as well, which I'm going to get into a little bit more. If you want more biodiversity, what should you focus on? If you want more yield and resilience, what should you focus on? So there's really not one size fits all in urban agriculture. That's really the message I'm trying to get across here as well. So again, just briefly, if we go through this, since you all want to learn about urban ag, on the ground soil can be great for vacant lots. It could be great for cities that have a lot of space. Some of the pros are a lot of variety of crops, but some of the cons are that it's not protected against the weather. It has some limits to its growing season. Now you can protect these a little bit. You can create small greenhouses. Now what these can do is they can extend that season, but again, you start to now have a little bit of permitting. You may have to register some of these temporary structures. You may have some limits on what you can do there, but it's still a very low cost way to extend the season. There's another integration of vertical farming besides the warehouse one you saw with Aero Farms, which is basements. These are less common, but they are kind of interesting in cities that have a lot of available space. So in this one, you have the potential to grow year round in really underutilized spaces like basements. And some of the cons of this are that because you use a lot of LED lights and many locations around the world are still powered by coal, your higher capex and your higher, basically your higher carbon footprint from using LEDs is a significant con in this method as well. Vertical farms and warehouses are similar. The difference is that between a basement and that, you get a kind of a bigger scale. And that has a big opportunity as well, because as you buy more equipment, you can reduce that capex, and you actually can reduce the cost of production by affording certain automation methods. And rooftop farms are very exciting. They can be, soilless, hydroponic, or they can be soil-based. Again, the main benefit here, one of the big ones, is that you're using space that wasn't used before. And when you find space in the city that isn't being used, you tend to be able to get it at a deal, sometimes free. Sometimes you're bringing traffic to the real estate project or the neighborhood that may have been left behind. So there's exciting options there. You also get additional benefits in insulation, as I mentioned earlier. But sometimes it's very expensive to build onto the rooftops. You need really minimum size to justify it. And actually, there's not that many rooftops available that makes sense for commercial agriculture, which tends to be around 40,000 square feet minimum that you're looking for. Greenhouses are well established. They're nothing new, but bringing them into the city has some new opportunities to have a wider variety than something like a vertical farm, but still get those benefits of year-round production. So big opportunities for greenhouses, especially on the outskirts of cities, to provide all kinds of vegetable and fruit products for consumers to eat, but also there's even some companies that are using greenhouses to grow, for example, tomatoes and lycopene for vegan-minded cosmetic products. So I think we're going to see the supply chain also start to include more of these greenhouse-grown products near cities. I certainly know that large companies are contacting us to understand their supply chain, how they can source more from low carbon local systems like greenhouses, for example. Microfarms are kind of a novelty addition. These are for restaurants or hotels that want to make a statement about what they're doing to localize and shorten the supply chain, let's say. Now, what they are is essentially kind of attractive furniture or display systems that have plants that are either grown from seed to full production there, or they actually are grown somewhere else and moved to this location. So companies like Babylon Microfarms is one example of that, or Smallhold that does this in mushrooms. I heard Whole Foods mentioned earlier. Certainly Smallhold has worked with Whole Foods and kind of installs these mushroom units, and then they have a centralized location where they produce the crop and then move it there right where the consumer is. And again, some of the benefits here that you're getting kind of this experience for the consumer, but you're also able to really command the best price because of that. But some of the downsides are, that again, you have to kind of move product from a centralized location to be in front of the consumer at some point. And in the end, because it's a smaller unit, you're going to be paying the highest price for the equipment in those units relative to the economies of scale of a bigger one. I know it's a lot of information, but we're getting through this. I really want to frame your thinking before I get into the tools where you actually can plan these farms on your own. Containers are popular. These are good if you really just want to get started and have a test, I suppose. I'm not a big fan of container vertical farms, but in the end, they are good if you're in kind of remote locations, or if you're in locations where you happen to just have a parking lot available and you like the idea of getting something modular just to start off with. But again, when you're forcing equipment into small spaces like a basement or a container, you tend to have higher carbon footprint and higher capex with very small economies of scale. Okay, so those are kind of all the possible ways, in the simplest format that you can grow food in the city, and kind of some of the pros and cons of that. Another way to challenge and think about urban farming and the pros and cons are the social, economic, environmental benefits and impacts of these facilities. So, economic, does it produce jobs? Is it actually profitable? Social, is it a space where immigrants can connect and share language and culture? Is it a space that brings different generations together? Is it a safe space? Environmental, biodiversity, water management, insulation to respond to various heating issues and reducing energy costs in that way. These are some of the potential environmental impacts. Water savings if they're hydroponics. But there's also secondary benefits which are aesthetic. When we're thinking about green cities of the future, we have to also ask ourselves, well, what is going to inspire us to live better? Well, certainly urban farming connects us with the food system. It reminds us that we did grow up historically having farming around the places where our cities were. It reminds us of the relationship that we have to the earth and the resources that we need to survive. So that's a very important one. And sometimes they're just so beautiful, they can inspire us to live better. Health, urban farming can impact your health from providing healthier, fresh food, but also can keep, for example, senior populations quite active. And there's mental and physical health benefits there. And certainly urban farming as something that embraces the food, water, energy, waste nexus better than any other sustainable urban technology is a great tool to educate on things like science, technology, engineering, and math. And I see it as a lot of a gateway technology to kind of get the next generation going as well. So many, many, many benefits. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about why this is happening, why you might want to be interested in this, or what's driving something like urban agriculture, which may seem like an extreme response, I suppose, to climate change or some of these issues. One of the main reasons is that consumers want more fresh, local, and organic food. And urban farming can respond to those needs from consumers. And so that's because of the kind of transparency and nutrition questions that consumers have. Another driver for urban agriculture is inequality in the urban environment. We see that cities are wonderful places to be, but they also amplify the divide between rich and poor. You get to see that firsthand. And so urban agriculture is sometimes a response to that, with communities saying, we can grow our own food, we can take ownership, we can fight food apartheid, and we can kind of equalize the system through our own urban farming, food justice. Climate change and fragility of the built environment, essentially, as COVID-19 has taught us, or climate change and various storms have taught us, the food system is fragile, especially that which is dependent upon particular climate environments for the crops to grow properly. So when we can create more resilient systems, more localized systems, that starts to become part of this urban resiliency strategy as well. I talked about aesthetic. As human beings, we do feel disconnected from the natural world. I was born in Hong Kong. I grew up in Hong Kong and Tokyo. And I love when cities integrate nature into them, because I get to have the best of both worlds. And so that kind of ecological and spiritual rationale is another reason why urban farming is gaining so much popularity today. Farming population is a big one. We actually have rising ages in farmers and less young farmers getting into the space. Again, if we don't have farms around us, why would we see that as a viable career path? And so that is also an issue. And then we're also having these tech advances that are making kind of these high-tech approaches to urban agriculture, like automated greenhouses or automated vertical farms or LED-powered vertical farms, more viable. The costs of those technologies are going down as they're becoming more deployed. So these are some of the main drivers. Okay, now if we talk about vertical farming alone, or even greenhouses and vertical farming controlled environments, it is, as I said, a more extreme reaction, because you're not just saying, let's take a rooftop and turn it into an urban farm with soil, and let's maximize the use of the sunlight, this available space. You're actually saying, I'm going to create an enclosure, I'm going to create a home for these plants. And just like human beings, plants need the right temperature, they need food, they need water, they need to be protected from the outside world. And all of those things cost money. So this is another assessment, another way of framing your thinking. Again, I'm trying to make you all very strategic urban farming thinkers and set you up for success as much as possible. But if we look globally, where will something like vertical farming, which is very, as I said, a bit radical in its response because it has a high capex, a lot of equipment, where will it make sense? Well, you can look at these drivers for any kind of urban farming and see what is going to make the likelihood of your project successful, because there's drivers that drive the economics. So for example, in the Middle East, water scarcity is an issue, food safety is an issue. There's a lack of arable land. There's unfavorable weather with extremely hot summers. There is a rising demand for local food. There's an interest from the government to be innovative and to be leaders in the sector of ag tech. And there are real food security issues with their supply chain at threat. So those are many drivers that would help justify something like a high-tech vertical farm. So why again, urban farming? Why is this worth it? Why is this important? Well, our urbanization has really gotten out of control. And 80% of all food produced globally is consumed in cities, and that's set to continue or be maintained. So cities are consuming all of our food, and yet cities do not participate in the planning of our food system. Okay, so I think that's just a recipe for disaster. I think the people that are consuming, or certainly the leadership that has responsibility over the population that's consuming, does need to be at the table in planning these farms and these facilities. But also the entrepreneurs that are in cities and want to make cities dynamic and resilient, independent, more vegetarian, more vegan, they need to be part of this as well, recognize this opportunity. So this translates globally. Even if you look at some of the assessments, 2018, there was a great study that looked at Google Earth and analyzed available spaces. Even in that conservative assessment, there's an $80 to $160 billion global opportunity in producing fruits and vegetables within city limits around the world. And so that is a pretty sizable market that could be used just from using vacant spaces in cities to produce fruits and vegetables. And that means that we could probably consistently globally produce 10% of our fruits and vegetables in cities. In some cities, if we look within the boundaries of the city or nearby, within the peri-urban areas of the city, some cities in the United States can achieve 70% of their total fruits and vegetable demand by producing in greenhouses and other farms in and near the city, very close by. So there's real opportunities for growth here in this sector to respond. And so our company accelerates that. Agritecture started as a blog in 2011. In 2014, I started getting consulting requests, so we spun it off into a consulting firm. And we've been working as a really kind of a high-touch services company to accelerate urban agriculture globally. Here you can see some of the cities and countries that we've worked in around the world. And what we've done is we've built the world's largest database of urban farms around the world. So all of these typologies I talked about, we build these databases, we understand how these farms work, how these models work rather, and we apply the right ones for our clients around the world. And we've worked with all kinds of startup urban farms, greenhouses, vertical farms. We worked in soil projects. We've worked with cities who want to accelerate this. And overall, this is where the background of our experience is. But we always knew we had to do more. And so what we did is we launched in April the beta version of our first software product, which is a digital platform intended to accelerate urban agriculture, and specifically through this entrepreneurship piece that we're so excited about. We love that entrepreneurs want to solve these problems. Our job is to reduce risk, to help you think about how urban agriculture may play a role in your business or your entrepreneurship journey, whether you're building a farm or whether you're going to have something that may be connected to these urban farms as well. So our software is really about saving you time, giving you independence, and giving you access to the credible and data-driven strategies we've developed over the past 6 years. It's also much, much, much cheaper than having to go to a consultant or going through the long journey of attending multiple events and getting different data points or reading through academic data. It really is the first place in the world where you can input information about your local context and get a snapshot of the economics of any greenhouse or vertical farm in the world. And so the way it begins is we have kind of classes on here as well that people can use. And so these are classes that people can learn about the various ways that they can grow. I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo in a moment, but I'm just going to show you the classes for a second. So we've got 6 classes on here. We believe that understanding the strategy is important first. And so this is, again, how do you build a greenhouse or vertical farm from your home computer? Well, Agritecture Designer allows that. So in my introduction, I gave an introduction to the, how do you develop a commercial urban farming strategy? How do you think about all these various aspects? What are some of the case studies? I go through some case studies that we can learn from. Yara goes through the economics. How do you build economic models and think about the main drivers for success? Urban farming can be profitable. We've worked in 26 countries to date, and we've been able to find a lot of profitable models for urban farming. And thank goodness our clients are still successful today. Technology choice is very important, especially in kind of these controlled environments that I mentioned, greenhouses and vertical farms. We get into marketing. It doesn't, you don't really have a technology problem in urban farming. It's mostly an operations and a marketing problem. So we focus a lot on choosing the right crop and understanding your market. Energy is assessed in this. And of course, for many of you, you'll probably be interested in our lesson on organics and aquaponics and the pros and cons of bringing organics into your production methods as well. The main big piece of the software is really our feasibility builder and our feasibility overview. So I'll show you in a second. I think we're going to have some time for that, but you basically input local data about where you are and you get a detailed financial overview of your facility. And then we also have a tool on here that allows you to estimate how much you could get for your product when you sell it, and actually encourages you to go to the store to refine that and get the economics for the products you're going to sell. Okay, so let me just see. I'm going to try and show you a little bit of this. I'm going to have to switch screens here for a second. So hang tight. Okay, let's see. So this should be here, okay? So this is what it looks like when you arrive on the page, right? And so you can see there's a demo video if you want to check it out. And this is really the the lowest cost way to estimate the cost of your greenhouse or vertical farm. So this is, again, answering the question of this whole lesson today, this workshop, which is how do you design one at home? Well, the first part of the software is completely free. And so it's a vision building tool. And this we built because we believe a lot of people just need to get their ideas onto paper. A lot of people have misconceptions about urban farming, how it works, greenhouses and vertical farms, what even makes sense? What can be grown? I get asked all the time, what can I grow in these? Or what's the best size to begin with? So this is a way to do that. So I can choose kind of who I am and what my role is in the company. And I can answer these questions for free. This is free. So all of you can go to design.agritecture and try this part for free and just explore it. But in this case, I'm going to say I'm an entrepreneur. I'm interested in profit. Maybe I'm interested in aesthetic a little bit. It's just me right now starting my business. I'm researching and formulating my ideas. So I'm in the early stages. Do I want to build a vertical farm, a greenhouse, a rooftop farm? I'd say I'm interested in a vertical farm or a greenhouse. I don't have much farming background. That's not exactly true, but for this one, I can choose my budget. So let's say I'm around 250K. So that's how much money I think I could raise. I'm very interested in urban environments. And I think I'm going to do kind of some herbs and maybe some vining crops, maybe some leafy greens. Why not? So I can choose my crops. I think I'm going to sell to restaurants to begin with. I think that's my audience that I'm interested in. And I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. Okay, so I can do Henry. Okay. Sorry, one second. We're just going through this. So you fill this in, and then you get to your vision report. So once you create an account, you can start to get into seeing your results. And again, this part is completely free as well to begin with, just because we want to get the ideas going. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see your vision, your idea on paper for the first time. And so each of these sections is kind of described. And so it helps you understand and educates you on some of the inputs that you chose in, okay? So again, this is talking about the aesthetic and how that may be important and the value of that. I talk about leafy greens. And so your vision is now here on paper and you can see it for the first time. We've also added a typical project plan. So I can actually go through and I can start to see the steps I need to go through to plan my farm. What should I be doing? What should I be thinking about every step of the way? And again, we're trying to manage expectations. We want to have the most successful farms possible. We're trying to move from helping over 130 clients in the world to helping thousands around the world be effective with this. We really believe in this future, and we want to empower people to design greenhouses or vertical farms. I can share my vision online, and I've actually started to access some of the algorithm on Agritecture Designer, and I've received 3 different projects that are similar to my input. So these are 3 real farms that Agritecture's looked at and stored in our database, and they've rated them based on relevancy to the inputs I gave. And I can actually go and I can learn about these projects, and I can get a little bit more detail about these projects. So this is the free part of the software, the vision report. Now I'm going to log into my other account. I'm going to show you what happens after you do decide to register. And this is where you can start to get a little bit further into the software and start to think about your economics a lot more. Okay, so once I'm logged in and I've signed up for more premium account, I can actually go to here on the side. So as I saw, you've got my inspiration, which are the things you basically input when you did the vision report, and these still exist here. I can go into my education tab, and I can start with my classes and look at my classes. And so we've broken these out into smaller modules, so I can go through each module. and learn about what I'm doing. And I can even download certain resources depending on what the class is. So I think Yara's class, for example, has some business planning Excel sheets that you can download as well, depending on where you are in the coursework, to learn about finances and economics. Okay, and then my projects tab is where I start to build my most, really my bigger projects. So basically I can build as many vertical farms or greenhouses or container vertical farming models I want. I can design these from my computer, just to reiterate that we're actually hitting the content of this today's presentation's title. But I can build them, and I can essentially see as they're in progress. And as I complete them, I can actually kind of compare them with each other. And I'm just going to show you on a video what that looks like in a moment. But this is kind of the other part of the tool, which is the market research tool. And so basically the way Agritecture Designer works is we want you to build scenarios. We want you to say, okay, greenhouse A is this size and grows tomatoes. Greenhouse B is this size and grows peppers. This is how they compare to each other. If I was to try this vertically, it's going to be too expensive. And then once you say, okay, well, greenhouse B is the right way, I can actually go to the store and I can look for that crop, that tomato crop that I want. And I can go to the store and I can even look on my phone and I can input what is that tomato selling for in my market, how is it packaged, how is it marketed, and then I can update my model. So it's a process of refining your business model specifically to get there. So let me just see, I'm just going to go back to the main page and play this video for a little bit to show you some of that in action. So again, on this demo video here, we can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to turn the volume down and see some of that in action. This is our amazing model, testing out Agritecture Designer. So if we go here, this is kind of what you get at the end, right? So you get, after you input information about your locality, what you want to grow, what your intention is, et cetera, you can actually get how much you're going to have to sell your product for based on typical economics. You get your CapEx and you get your OpEx. And then we go deep and we break down your CapEx in detail. And so again, when you're designing a farm, you need to understand how much is going towards lighting or how much typically is, especially as you're gathering those quotes. How are you going to compare any of that? You need to really understand that. And this is a really good way of doing due diligence on quotes you're getting, or even if you're a developer and you're thinking about how much rent I could get or how much I could rent from an urban farm, et cetera. We give you a 15-year operating summary. We break down your payback period. And again, this is kind of what the market research tool looks like as well. So again, it goes through the vision. I showed you these steps. And I just want to go back to the economics for a minute. So these are some of the kind of economic tools that you're able to download from the classes. We include a free webinar for members as well. So you can kind of learn a bit more about what other members are looking at. This is a snapshot of the feasibility tool where I can choose what percentage of my farm is dedicated to what crop. And what I'm really excited about is that this is actually the first online tool that allows you to estimate yields related to different crops for greenhouses and vertical farms. When I was starting off trying to figure this out, I had to dig through academic data just to find out, how much yield there could be. And the thing about that is that it's not normalized. You can't compare one greenhouse to the other. We've created an algorithm that allows you to do that. Our algorithm pulls in local temperature, local light data. So especially on the greenhouse aspect, it's very relevant to what you could expect. So again, here's a little bit of a preview of what to expect there. You've seen some of this, and I definitely invite you to go and check that out. Let me just switch back to my presentation here in a moment. Okay. So again, you can go to design.agritecture.com if you want, and you can design any greenhouse or vertical farm in the world. We have done a lot to make sure that it's effective. We basically uploaded all of our experience online and made it accessible to you. This is kind of the different options. The seed one is the free vision tool that I showed you. The Sprout one is 30 days of access and allows you to take our online classes. We typically do those for $500 in person in New York. They always sell out. We've taken them online. Very excited to do that. The starter bundle is where you can actually combine the classes with the feasibility tool that I showed you. And that gives you 90 days of access. You have 90 days to plan your urban farming business and kind of compare greenhouses and vertical farms, and even join some of the webinars so you can learn from us as well. And the concierge bundle is if you want just a little bit more of a confidence boost. Agritecture will actually join you and train you on the software and answer some of your questions as well along the way to help you be prepared. So this is really the cheapest way for you to design a greenhouse or vertical farm anywhere in the world, and you can do it completely virtually from your home computer. It's something we're very excited about because we're really trying to scale our impact globally. And what's exciting about this is we're building some new features. So this is just beta, but we're actually building a really kind of start to finish customer journey product so that anybody who wants to get involved in urban agriculture can get there smoothly and reduce risk along the way. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know I totally went over, but let's dive into some questions. Hopefully I can capture some of these.
Henry, thank you so much. This was super helpful and insightful. And if anybody in the community wants to reach out, we're happy to put you in touch with them or have them go directly. I don't think there are any questions, so
no problem. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the summit. Take care.
Thank you.